Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Tester. You know what we like to do on Daily Spark. We want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we are talking to an author. We're talking about life. We're talking about life lessons and the things that you can get out of a very awesome experience. My guest today is Mark Binkley, and he is an author. You can find him online at red.shotbook.com. Red.shot. Phantom of the Wilderness. The talk will be about a wilderness experience that Mark has endured and his thoughts about his experiences, the consequences, and the very interesting yet strange occurrences that happened. So let me tell you a little bit more about Mark. Mark says that he is an ordinary man that has experienced an extraordinary event. I live like everyone else, he says. I try to have fun and carry as much of a positive attitude as I can. He enjoys helping people learn skills that he also has acquired. He would rather be doing something than just sitting around shooting the breeze, and I can understand that. He feels that life is just the beginning, is that just the very beginning for him, and that there are a lot of good things to come in his journey. He enjoys talking about his book as well as looking for new ideas and new ways to express himself. He is aspiring to write new works and to do some innovating things. His 2 children are his life, and of course, he loves and supports them with everything that he has. He is nearly 60 years of age, but he is blessed enough to be able to engage in activities that he greatly enjoys, like skiing as well as playing pool. But he skis at an advanced to expert level. And I know that some people are going, well, I do that too. But like he says, he's almost 60 years old. So yoo-hoo for that. I know some folks that can't do it and they're in their 40s. Anyway, playing pool is another thing that he enjoys, and it is a passion of his, as well as writing books and sharing about what he has learned. He wants to stand up for himself as well as for others and to teach other people to do the same thing. Now, he understands that folks sometimes get in a little trouble, but of course, let's learn the lesson that you can learn from each and every experience. And I love how he says that if we treat others with respect, then we will get respect in return. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
I love that you said that if we treat people with respect, then we can expect to get the same amount of respect in return. I think that people have forgotten that we need to offer the respect to others first. Sometimes we just expect to get it. Now, I want to talk about, of course, this wonderful book that you have written, but I feel as though we should talk a little bit more about you growing up to give a little bit of context to the book. So can you tell us a little bit about what was it like to be you growing up?
Oh, life was very difficult. I'd experienced undue amount of punishment for things that I really didn't understand what I was doing wrong. And there appeared to be some overlying aspect of why I was being mistreated, and I didn't realize what the problem was until much later in life. Very difficult growing up.
Yeah, and I like how you said that you didn't know the reason, like you weren't explained what was going on, and boy, have we heard that on some of the other shows, that getting the discipline, sometimes you understand that discipline is needed. It might even be expected in some cases, but it's just could you tell me at least what I did wrong so that I don't do it again? No
Right.
one no one enjoys discipline when they're
Well,
receiving it. It's like, just tell me
no.
what I did wrong.
I believe in direction over discipline and reward over punishment. And that's the way I brought my kids up, because I thought that was the better way to do things than to have them experience what I experienced, because I experienced it. I didn't think that was fair at all for them to grow up in that kind of environment.
And I like how you're trying to be you were trying to be a very conscious parent. You were trying to be very aware of the things that worked for you and didn't work for you. And that's one of the ways that we can really make a difference. Our parents did what they thought was best with the information that they had. So I can understand you saying, I have new information, so I'm going to try to be the best parent I can be with this new information that I have. Well, speaking of growing up and all of that, there's a hunting experience that you talk about in your book. What were you feeling during this hunting experience that you write about?
Well, when I was invited by my father to go up to the woods, I couldn't imagine that he wanted to take me up there, because I wasn't that kind of a person that really had strength to go on an elk hunting trip, and I was a little bit apprehensive because I didn't know whether I could live up to his expectations or not. And it was kind of a scary experience and very arduous journey back into the wilderness. And I just hope that if I had the opportunity to get a shot at something, that I wouldn't let him down. And it was a great deal of pressure on me, because I'd never been able to please him my entire life on doing anything I'd ever done. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard those types of stories where it just did not matter. You could have wrangled the stars, the sun, the moon, found all the diamonds in the world, a gold mine, everything, and it just still would not have been, great job, son, or
yeah, I know. I'm so proud of you, son. I can't believe you actually did this thing. Yeah.
Right.
So, do you want me to talk more about the hunting experience?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So anyway, I get up to that one spot on the trail. We've hiked in about 8 miles so far with the horses, and I see this elk on the trail, and couldn't believe that it was actually there. It was only maybe 60 yards away, and so I asked my father if I could try to sneak up on it, and I got fairly close, within about 40 yards, and I figured that was about as close as I could get, because it had walked across the meadow. And I started to stand up behind this tuft of grass because I had no cover, and I didn't even get my bow. We were archery hunting, of course, and I didn't even get my bow fully pulled back. And he yelled out, "Don't spook him," very loudly, and he was a couple hundred feet away from my location, and all the elk just took off running, and I couldn't imagine why he would do something like that. Yeah. Even though when we went on other rifle hunting trips, he would always tell me, "Don't spook him, I'm making too much noise, don't drag your feet," all this kind of stuff. And I just kind of passed it off as, well, he got excited and he didn't want me to scare the animal. But I believe it was a test. It was a test from God, just because he knew of my father's jealous nature, unfortunately, and he failed that test, okay? So the very next day, we go down to this area that's down at the bottom of a gigantic bowl with a rim ridge going around it, all the way down, almost clear to this bottom of the ravine where there's a river flowing through it. And we take two horses down there and tie them up. And we go about 150 yards in, and then I asked him if I could blow the bugle, which I had practiced diligently for months to try to get the sound right. And he said, yeah, go ahead, but I don't think you'll get an answer because it's too warm and they're probably not going to bugle. But go ahead and try it anyway. So I did, and I blew my bugle, and I got an answer from an elk. And, of course, we're in an area where there's nobody around. And so anyway, I waited a little bit and didn't hear anything, and then I blew it again and didn't hear anything. And then instinctively, I don't know how or why, because I didn't know how to track animals or you know, go in for the to get a shot or anything like that. I took off running towards the sound where I heard it coming from, and this is about a half a mile away, because you know, I could just tune in to where the sound was coming from, and I figured if I could get to a spot where it was open and clear, that I had my best chance, you know, to shoot the animal if one came by, if that animal came by, or if anything came by. And so I get cleared the other side, and it's just about ready to start into the other area, which is another bowl on the other side, big bowl, mountains. And I come to a clearing, small clearing, and it's about 30 yards wide, about 50 yards long, and there's a big log on my left side and this rock. And I kneeled down on the rock with my bow ready. I had the arrow in the bow and everything. And about 5 seconds later, I look off to my right, and I see these two elk knees coming down through the woods. That's all I could see. And I turned to where I thought my father was, and I said, "Here he comes," real quietly. And before I knew it, this majestic bull elk with a 7x7 royal crown rack on it was standing 30 yards broadside to me and looked straight at me. And it was a beautiful rack. So here's my chance. I if I blow this, I'm never going to hear the end of it from my father. You know, you screwed it up. You know? And so I slowly stand up and pull the bow back as I'm standing up, and I take aim and I release the arrow, and it slams right into the side of the animal. And this is why I call it a red dot shot, because if you aim a target on this animal, I hit the bullseye, the best kill spot through both lungs, you know, close to the heart and everything. So then I screamed out, I shot it. I got it. And I took off running because the animal, you know, hunched down and then jumped over the log, and it was gone, but I could hear it going down the hill. And so I started running after it because I figured it wasn't going to go very far. And I get about 20 yards down the hill, and I didn't even know where my father was at, and all of a sudden he goes, "Don't go down there," really loud and mean voice. And I turned around and looked at him and go, "Why? That's where the elk went. I heard it. And he goes, "Went all the way to the river. We'll never find it." And I'm trying to think, you know, what is going on? Okay, so maybe he's trying to tell me that if I chase after the animal, it'll go all the way to the river, which is about 1.5 miles away. And so, you know, it being, you know, trying to honor my father's request, I stopped, and so we're just heading straight back and forth across the hill. And about 1/2 mile across and 1/2 mile back, and I'm not going down. So now 1.5 hours has passed by, and I'm going, you know, I'm going to try this again. I'm going to try to go down because, you know, obviously it's probably dead by now for sure. And, you know, and so I started heading down the same spot again, and he yells out again, "Don't go down there." Again, same way. And I turn around and looked at him and go, "Why?" And he goes, too steep, we'll never get the horses down there. And then at that moment, I go, oh, I know what's going on now. He's jealous, and he doesn't want me to find it. He's preventing me from finding it. I'm going, oh, my God, this is crazy. So I immediately thought of a plan. What do I need to do to go find my elk? Because I did not want to let it go to waste. I feel bad about killing anything anyway. I'm not really a hunter, okay? But I'm going up there to please my father and do something with him, try to see if I can make him proud of me. Oh, this is not This is not working.
Well, Mark, I am going to cut you off right there, but please hold on to that point, listeners. We have got to go to a break, but I know you want to know what else happened. So do I.
Oh,
Don't
yes,
worry.
You do.
Listeners, we will be back right after this. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Mark Stewart Binkley, and he is the author of Red Dot Shot, Phantom of the Wilderness. We are talking about an experience that he had that has been a little eye-opening, and I think that you will find it to be as well. So, Mark, you were telling us that you had the opportunity to finally get the elk of a lifetime. You hit it, that red dot shot, and then something happens. Something dawns on you.
Yeah, well, the second time when my father told me to don't go down there, and I realized what was going on, that it was all about jealousy. I had to make up a plan to go and find my elk, and quite possibly have to go get help, because we had somebody else with us in our hunting party. And so I took off running straight across the hill as fast as I could to try to get away from him so that he couldn't shout out to me and stop me from going down the hill. I wanted to be out of earshot and sight and all that. So I was running as fast as I could, straight as an arrow across this hillside. And I came up across a elk rack, what appeared to be an elk rack laying on the ground. And I turned around and said, I found it. And my father was a couple hundred feet behind me, and I couldn't believe he kept up with me. And at that moment, I could see that he could see that there was something there, and that I might have found the elk that I'd shot. And his shoulders drooped down, and his head drooped down. And I was reading the body language, that he was saying to me, because I'm a very good reader of body language, because that's all I got from my father. I rarely talked to him about anything. It was just about what he wanted me to do. So I get a little closer, and I realize that this elk rack is not the one I shot, because it's a skeleton laying on the ground. But this elk rack is in perfect condition, like it had been sitting in somebody's living room, and it was a 7x8 Royal. It was as big as the one I'd shot. Yes. Incredible find. Nobody that I've ever heard of has ever found anything like this. And the reasons behind why I found this is so totally incredible. It's like God had directed me straight to this find, because there was no other way I was going to find that, not by accident. Okay? So we get over to the elk rack, and my father immediately pulls out a saw and cuts the horns off of the skull. And I'm going, wow. I didn't say anything. And I'm just going, what are you doing? And he usually takes pictures of our fishing trips and whatever, and he didn't pull his camera out or anything, and I'm just going, wow. Okay. So, right. So I picked up the antlers. This is kind of funny too. I picked up the antlers and I set them up away from the horses a little bit so they wouldn't step on them. And then I took off running. back towards where I'd shot the animal because I was going to go find my elk that I'd shot. I wasn't going to. I was going to give it one more try.
Right.
And I ran as fast as I could, trying to get away from him. He kept up with me again. As soon as I got to that spot, he said, "Don't go down there again." And I turned around, and oh man, I felt so bad. You have no idea the feelings that were going through my body. I can't describe. It, you know, in my book, I state that it felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster where I've had this high going to the top of the roller coaster, where I was elated that I'd actually shot this trophy bull elk, to the low of my lifetime where I realized that I was going down the roller coaster and there was no track at the end of the bottom of the ride.
Wow.
Yeah, that I was going to crash. And it felt so horrible. I just can't describe the feeling I felt. I was devastated. And I slowly walked out of those woods with him back to the horses. And then I, started to feel a little better, going, well, at least I got this rack. It's a nice big one. It's a bigger rack than I've ever seen hanging anywhere. Okay, so I go, let's get these antlers tied up on the back of the horses so we can get them back up to camp. And he goes, we'll never get them back up to camp. They'll get tangled up in the brush. And I went and finally stood up to my father and didn't say a word, but I bent over and picked those antlers up and put them on my shoulders and headed straight up the mountain, didn't look back. And I carried that rack all the way up the mountain, nonstop. I was pumped full of adrenaline. And I made it all the way up the top, back up to camp. And I think we're probably going to run out of time because I can't tell you the whole story because it gets way weirder than this. I'm not kidding. Yeah, it's this is just the beginning. But yeah, the find of a lifetime is what binds the story together because if you don't want to believe everything that's happened, which is the truth, there's something physical and substantial that is proof that something happened.
That something happens, right?
Something happened.
Well, Mark, I want to ask you then, when people have experiences, they decide what they're going to do with that experience, with the information, with the lesson that they've learned, with the feelings that they have. Why did you finally decide that now was the time to come forward and to share?
Well, I kept it a secret for a long time. I didn't want to tell anybody about it. I didn't want to disgrace my father. I didn't want to lose him as a father, even though he'd done this horrible thing. And it ate me up. I had nightmares over it, and I'd wake up every morning going over those three phrases over and over. It was driving me crazy. It took me about 10 years before I managed to even get that out of my head to where I wasn't waking up every morning. First thing I'd think about was, don't go down there. Those phrases. Oh, yeah. It was haunting me. And I'd wanted to tell him my whole life that I was no fool and I knew what was going on, but I didn't know how to do it.
Right.
So after I got married, and eventually I got divorced, 8 years later, and we still managed to become friends and stay friends.
Okay.
And I went, it was for my children too.
Right.
And so I'd go down there to visit and everything, and there was no problems or anything like that. And I started to tell her about my story because it was basically brought on by my experience that I had with my father after he had divorced my mother and moved to another state. And I was over there, and he said something to some of his friends that infuriated me. And it made me realize, he has no conscience about this. He doesn't care about how I feel. And so I started telling people my story, and they were infatuated with the story. And they listened to me for an hour, telling them the story and everything that happened. So I eventually told my ex-wife and that I was having serious issues with this problem, and that had plagued me for my entire life. And she says, you should write a letter. And I go, well, that's a great idea. That's a great way for me to be able to get my closure on this and tell them that I am no fool and I knew what was going on. So I wrote this letter. It took me 6 months to write it, because I really didn't want to do this. Okay. And I wrote 5 pages explaining the details of the hunting trip and everything and all the experience and the emotions that I was going through and everything, and asked for an apology and so that I could forgive him and put this behind me.
Of course.
And, of course, I didn't get that. And, of course not, right? I got a letter back in writing where, that was stating lies and stuff that didn't happen, and I have an eyewitness that could testify to the fact that that's not the truth at all. And so then I kept on telling my story, and finally this one gal was interested in going out with me, and I told her that I have a lot of baggage, and you should know about this before you get involved with me. And I told her about the story. She goes, you should write a book. And I go, what? I didn't even think I had enough information or a story. And so I started writing a book. I was inspired by her to write a book, and I wrote this book, and I've never felt better in my life. I've been alive for almost 60 years, but I haven't been living except for the last 2 years. I have not really felt alive and aware and with my self-perseverance until this time. I had to get it out.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well,
how
it gets weirder than that.
People. Yeah, it's like, oh my goodness. Thank you for the people that are in your life that kind of encourage you and keep you going.
Well,
that keep you motivated enough to not stop or get stuck. I'm glad that she said, hey, there might be a book in there.
I did all this with God's help, I believe. And I believe I was chosen for this journey. And it's been a hard journey, and I would not recommend anybody having to go through the experience that I went through, because it was horrible experience. So.
And I can understand that, and thank you so much for sharing with us as much as you possibly can. Of course, without giving the whole story away, because sorry folks,
I don't want to give the whole story away.
You're gonna have to buy the book if you want to know exactly what happened. But you definitely shared enough with us to pique our interest and definitely want to get a copy of the book. Well, it is almost time for us to go to break, but I want to give you an opportunity to share with our listeners how can they get in contact with you, or where can they get a copy of the book, please, Mark?
Well, the book is available on Amazon as basically everything else is. So you just go to Amazon.com and look for Red Dot Shot Phantom of the Wilderness. It's the second edition, and it's much better written than the first edition, I think. It gives more detail, and there's another chapter that's been inserted that pertains to the story that I excluded in the beginning because I just didn't want to put it in there. But now I believe that it belongs in the story, and you can get that on Amazon.com, and it's fairly reasonable, and the ebook is even the most reasonable rate. It's only $2.99. It's really really reasonable.
Yeah. I like that price. And yes, I know someone's going, oh yeah, $2.99, most definitely, less than $5. That means you can get a copy, download it on your phone, on your tablet, and read it while you're on the train or stuck in traffic or whatever it is. We know how that goes, don't we, folks? Alrighty, everybody, we need to take a very short break, but when we get back, we will definitely continue our conversation with author Mark Stewart Binkley. We'll be back right after this.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know, which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative? I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Today, my guest is Mark Stewart Binkley, and he is the author of Red Got Shot, Phantom of the Wilderness. Well, Mark, I would like to ask you this. So many times people have these experiences that have happened to them, and in many cases they want to go back to where a certain something has happened because it is to either give them closure, to help them realize how strong they are, just for whatever reason. So my question to you is, would you take the trip back to the wilderness by yourself, knowing everything that has happened, knowing the dangers, knowing, the memories that you have and all of that? Would you go back?
Well, knowing all the dangers and everything that I went through and the close calls that I had and the fact that I could have starved to death, died of exhaustion, or been eaten by wolves, probably not. There was no. Even though I wasn't scared when I was up there, I probably should have been. But I was on a mission. I wanted to get my closure. I wanted to go back to the spot where the incident had happened to see if I could find maybe some bones or something. But what I found down there was much more than I had ever anticipated, and it really brought closure for me. But no, I wouldn't try that again for anything by myself. That hurt so much. I mean, my feet were burning. It was a 42-mile trek. I did it in 2.5 days with hardly any food and hardly any sleep. And I was exhausted. I packed too much to bring a camp up there so that, that I could have shelter. And when I got 8 miles in, I realized I might not make it through here. I'm going to have to abandon my camp because I was so exhausted. When I tried to sleep that night, my heart was beating at about 120 beats per minute, and it wouldn't slow down for hours. Oh, I was so scared. I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And going off into the wilderness, I had no idea how long and hard it was going to be for me to get through all that. And then I had to spend a night in the woods with basically no clothing. All I had a shirt on my back because I thought I was going to be strong enough and tough enough to turn around and come back and do all that, get out of there, pack my tent out of there and everything. No. I had to hightail it out of there and get out of there while I still had enough energy to get out of there. It was, but I was very elated when I'd finally made it all the way out. And I got into a place of refuge, and some very nice people took me in, and they were very Christian-oriented, and they prayed with me and everything. And then they sent me on my way when my feet were just agonizing. And, it felt like I was walking on nails, but I still had 8 miles to go.
Oh,
and
wow.
I cannot wait until this is over. Oh man! When I got back to my car, I thought there was no way I was going to take another step. That's how exhausted I was. I applaud all these people that have gone through these wilderness treks and everything and survived. Yeah, I'm just going. It is not fun. It is very hard, and no, I would not have tried that again. No, because I could have twisted an ankle, my muscles could have spasmed on me. I could have strained my back, which would have made it very difficult to walk out of there. All kinds of things could have happened.
Been stuck then. Right.
And then I've been out there with nobody would know where to look for me. I told people where I was going, but it's a huge area. I mean, with probably 500,000 acres up there. It's like you finding somebody even in 1 acre, it would be hard enough. So yeah,
that
crazy.
Is so funny. So when it comes to writing the story, and thank you for being open and honest about that, because you could have easily said, "Oh yeah, I'd go back up there," and and it was whatever.
No.
Thank you for being honest about it. It's like my feet hurt, I was ready to go, and it was like, please get me out of here. I love that answer. So how long did it take for you to write the story, to really get it all together and decide what parts of your experiences were you going to share, and just getting everything that was in your mind down on paper? How long did that take for you?
Well, the whole thing took me about 7 months, but I got off to a slow start because I went up into the wilderness in August, and my window for getting up there was beginning to close, so I had to get it done. And it was like 3 days before my birthday, actually, and for my 56th birthday. And so anyway, I get back, and I'm living with my mom, and helping her with things. She's getting up in years and everything, and I didn't make enough money to live out on my own and pay child support at the same time. So it kind of worked out for both of us. But I was in a room where the furniture didn't suit me, and I'd had everything else basically in storage up in the other rooms. And I wanted to have a more of a pleasant setting with my furniture in the room. So I had to take one piece at a time and shuffle things around to get it set up to where I had the environment that I wanted to be in to write my book. And, of course, I put my elk rack right there on the wall, and everything was in storage. And I started writing about a month later, and I had to figure out how I was going to write it. So I figured the best way to do it was just to do it chronologically, take these certain events that had happened through a timeline. And the hardest part of it was, of course, writing the first page. How am I going to make it interesting enough to where people want to be intrigued enough to want to read this book? So that's the hardest part. And I got that going, and then basically the rest of it was easy because I was just writing my story, the experience that I went through. And then I took a break for a while because it was taking a long time, and I spent a lot of hours writing it. And then I got back into it, and I had to finish the last few chapters, and that took me 3 more months, and then I was finally finished in May of the next year, and contemplating getting published. And I'm going, man, I really don't want to do this, but you know what? I've been through all this horrible experience and everything twice, and I need to do this. I need to get this done and just go and do it. And so I looked for a publisher. One popped up right away, and I called them, and they were very excited about the book, and read the first 4 chapters. That's what they asked. Send us the first 4 chapters. They read it and liked it very much, and said that this is movie material. And I'm kind of agreeing. I think it is movie material, And the rest is history. I'm sitting here talking to people like you, and that are interested in my story.
And it is such an interesting story, and I can really see it growing and being so much so that other people can learn. Because like you said, it is something that happened. It is not only just the experiences that you had, like the physical things that were going on in the woods, but it is also the revelations that you have when you're in the wilderness, and how you've been able to take those revelations and really make them your own. Because sometimes people, they come to a conclusion about something and they're like, oh, wow, is that what they meant? Okay. But then they do nothing more with it. It's like they just drop the bag and keep going. But it's like, well, now that you've had the revelation and you understand what's happening and what's going on, what are you going to do with that information? And you've done something with that information. And that's the part that I like, that it didn't just stop with the realization. You were able to take it and really make it something else and make it your own. Well, we are down to our very last question of the day, but I've really enjoyed my time here with you today. Thank you so much for being on. I want to ask this. How has your life changed, or how has your perspective of living your life changed, and have you been able to kind of ripple that out to the other people that are around you? Like, have your friends and family members kind of understood that, hey, life could be a little bit different, but I mean it in a positive way, in a very positive way? How has things changed for you?
Well, they've changed quite a deal after I wrote the book and I started getting the attention for it. I felt like I've never felt this good in my life. I was carrying around this heavy burden for all this time, and I had no idea how badly it was weighing me down. And after I expressed my story and was able to write the book, I felt great, and things started turning around in a very positive way for me. And my pool game shot up. I started doing much better. Right? And it got way better. My interpersonal relationships at work and everything started to improve. And having better conversations with people, and just generally feeling good. I've never felt this good in my life. Like I say, I've been alive for almost 60 years, but I've never felt like I've been living until the last couple of years. I had no idea what kind of burden that this whole thing had brought upon me. And I was so happy to be able to share the experience with people, and get them interested in my story, and a real big eye opener, basically.
We just never know how our stories can really touch the lives of others and help them through something that they're going through. Because I believe that once you get to be a certain age, everyone has their story that is a version of being in some type of wilderness, having some type of experience, and having some type of revelation. Yours happened to be in a true wilderness, but for many people, maybe that wilderness is being in the basement, or being on the beach, or being at boarding school. But whatever it is, I think that if we read this and we really read it with our eyes open, ears open, we will be able to really gather the greater meaning that you're sharing with us in this particular book. Well, we are down to our last minute, and I want to give that minute to you for you to share with our listeners. If there's one bit of nugget, one bit of wisdom that you could share with our listeners, what would that be?
Well, my nugget of information that I would like to share with people is that if you're in a toxic relationship, there's really no way that you're going to be able to change that person unless they are willing to change themselves. So probably the best way is to put those people aside and get them out of your lives, and surround yourself with more positive people and positive influences. and find a new direction, because that's what I had to do. And it's kind of sad that sometimes you have to leave friends and family behind, but sometimes there's no other way, because you're not going to be able to change that person unless they want to change themselves.
Mark Stewart Binkley, he is the author of Red Dot Shot, Phantom of the Wilderness. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Mark.
Well, thank you.
And listeners, thank you for spending this time with me as well. And as always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Goodbye, everyone.